Now, in a previous video, we saw one example of a parameter lock where I took this bass tom track and that air rate sound that's assigned to it, and I made it so that this first trig would play for a length of 16 steps. Now, realistically, if this is the only trig on that track, I don't really need to parameter lock that. I could simply just adjust the length parameter, and then that one trig would play for a length of 16 steps. But the point is that you kind of get used to the idea of parameter locking. And I think there's a lot of different cool things that we could parameter lock on some of these other sounds. Some of them are obvious and some of them are not so obvious. One example would be, let me just make sure that this bass tom is muted again, because I don't really want to hear that right this second. If I go ahead and mute a few more of these sounds, mute the kick, I'm going to mute those hats. So I got my two little drum sounds from the drum break. And I'm not really in love with how this particular kick sounds right now. Let me select that track. And I'm going to go to the sample page here. And I'm going to go ahead and turn the loop on and just hear how that sounds. We can see the distance between the start and end point is pretty short. Now I like that a lot better. Now it might be cool so that it doesn't always have that loop come on every single time there's a trig played here. So I think I might want to parameter lock that at some point. But the other thing that I'm noticing is that what's kind of bothering me about the sound of this kick, since we can't really fine tune the start and end points that intensely, when you have a longer sample, it might be harder to get the start and end point to line up exactly where you want. So as this kick plays in my pattern, it feels just a little bit late. Now, there's a couple things I can do to sort of remedy this. I could either make it so that my bass drum track plays a little bit later so that the kicks from there line up with the kicks in this sample. Or I can make it so that let's stop that. Or I can make it so that this particular kick drum that's looping plays a little bit earlier so it's more in line with the bass drum that's here. So I think what I'll do is I'm going to make it so that the kick drum on this track plays a little bit earlier. I can do that with micro timing. And after I do this, I'm going to go ahead and parameter lock the loop parameter for just certain steps on here. So if I want to use micro timing, I simply hold down, well, first I have to make sure that I'm in the grid record mode. So I press the record button. Then I can see the trigs that are in the sequence in my pattern. I'm holding down the first trig, and then I can use my left and right arrows to either move it a little bit behind or a little bit ahead of the beat. So I think, yeah, moving it back by a 96 note might be good. Let's see. Okay. And once I've done that, if I like how it sounds, I can simply copy and paste this trig, and it's going to copy and paste that micro timing adjustment that I did as well. So I'm going to hold this down, copy trig 1, and paste it, paste it, paste it, paste it. Okay, sounds a little bit better there. So let me get out of my grid recording mode for a second. And as this plays, I'm going to play with the end point a little bit. Let me make sure that I know exactly where this is at. 28, okay. Now that, I think, would be awesome to parameter lock. So let me go ahead and mute the kick again here. Make sure that I'm on the right track. Go back to my grid recording mode, and I'm just going to change the endpoint for some of these trigs. I think for this first trig, since we don't really hear the kick repeat that much, I'm going to go ahead and make the endpoint a little bit shorter here. And for this one, maybe make it really short. Maybe for this one. Now, if I make the end point go before the start point, or vice versa, the sample will play in reverse. Now, based on where we're playing it from, I'm not really hearing the reversed action as much. Let's see. Okay, and let me go back to this first one. I'm just going to change that loop back. All right, so we got that going on. Now, one thing I'm realizing is, even though I was chopped with the little drum sample, it's not really giving me what I like, but I do like the little looping stuff that's happening here. So what could be interesting, I like the snare that's happening on track 8. And I think what could be cool is to maybe keep the start and end point, keep the parameter locks that I have there, and maybe also parameter lock what sample is being played at specific trigs. That could lead to some very interesting results. So let's go ahead and play this again. And I'm going to go hold down some of these trigs here. And let's see. Okay, that's pretty cool. I hit yes there. And I'm going to change the tuning of that for this step so it's in tune with the other stuff. And I'm going to go to the amp page here, and that particular step will add some delay to it. All right, so I'm going to place a trig here, and I'm going to make this a different sample. Hit yes there. I'm going to turn this trig down a little bit. Maybe make this a faster loop there. And let's tune this. Fine tune it a bit. And while we're at it, why not? There we go. So now we can hear this one's playing backwards. And let me go ahead and change this one as well. So basically what I'm doing is I'm replacing all the kick sounds that I had before with these vocal samples. There we go. That's much more interesting now. And again, since these two tracks share the same voice, every time that sampled snare plays, it cuts off or chokes whatever's playing from this particular track. So let me just hear this with the bass drum. I'm going to select the kick drum track here. And I think what I like to do with this kick, let's go ahead and change the kick type. So let's do some parameter locks affecting the decay time and the sweep time. I think for the first one here, we can make this pretty long. Let me make sure I'm on the right track. Let's hold track. We got the bass drum. All right, so here we go. All right, now we're getting some cool stuff to happen here. Got some overdrive there. And let me bring our little air raid sound back in here. Now the last thing I'm going to do before I move on is I think it'd be cool to have the air raid sound play on the left side and then the right side. So right now I only have 16 steps here. I'm going to go ahead and make the synth this track with the air raid sound twice as long. So hold function, go to my scale page, and the second number is going to show me, well, to let me increase this by 16 steps. So now we have 32 steps, basically 2 bars. And when I did that, now we can see there's 2 lights here above the page button. And I can see both pages of 16 steps and the trigs that have been entered there. On the second page, it's copied the trig from the first page. So we see it there. So I'm going to parameter lock these. So one of them is playing on the left side. I'm in my amp page, panning is right there. This one will play on the right side. All right, there we go. All right, so I got a few other ideas, but right now, again, I like the way that we're kind of shaping this and the way that the pattern is evolving.